Hello, Suns fans. Welcome back to the GCSUNScast. It's been a bit of a break since our last episode. Pretty standard why. Coronavirus, blah, blah, blah. My name is Shane. I'm your host. Joining me is Tom. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Yeah, g'day, Shane. Having lots of fun in lockdown by the sounds of it, are you?
No. I think the Easter weekend, the 4 days we've just had, was probably the longest amount of time I've spent at home. I think I spent pretty much the entire 4 days at home, and I was going batshit crazy by the end of it. I was so glad to get back to work on Tuesday today.
Yeah,
yeah, just good to have that routine going. I think the new Final Fantasy VII game came out, and that's a game I remember playing as a teenager. So strong childhood memories there. I'd planned to play that game pretty much all the weekend. I think I got about 8 hours in, and then I somehow strained my neck. I think my headphones might have been too heavy, and I spent for the next couple of days just resting in bed, trying to keep my neck straight, watching Foxtel, so watching old episodes of Modern Family. I was never that keen on the show when it came out, but I'm relating to it quite well now, so I'm enjoying that. What have you been up to?
It sounds like it's aging well. It's one of the ones I can always go back to. Doesn't matter which season or which episode. It's always a bit of fun. Look, bit of the same. Bit too using my right click hand a bit too much, and got a bit of a crick in the neck, but. Yeah, look, just reevaluating things. I do get up and out and about, but not as much as you, because you're still working in the real world, and I'm working from behind a computer, which basically means I've got the same job, and they pay me less, and I have to do twice as much. So it's not awe-inspiring, but if you don't work, you don't get paid, and if you don't get paid, you can't pay your way, and then you sooner or later be swimming in a park, which I don't really fancy too much. But anyway, it sounds like it's working, isn't it? The lockdown, and just for, everyone's bloody sick of talking about it, but it seems like it's working, and we've just got to keep doing it. And then bit by bit, things will get back to normal, and maybe we'll even see some footy before the end of the year. NRL fans will be happy because their chief executive is living in fantasy land and reckons they're going to start the comp up again in a few weeks. But I just think it's irresponsible and stupid. I'd rather wait for a couple of months and just know that everything's going to be, as good as it can be, because everything's unknown, isn't it?
It is. The smart thing to do is for us to continue what we are doing until it can't be undone, all the hard work we've all put in, because if they release their restrictions too soon and too fast, we're going to have a second spike in that curve, and we'll be stuck in lockdown for, could be as long as till September or October this year, if that's the case.
Yeah, and it could be that we're stuck in lockdown until then anyway. But if we try and come back too soon, then we guarantee that something's going to happen. And there are people out there who, that they don't mind if all the old people die, but I'm pretty sure those of us who've got older relatives and friends and that kind of thing would prefer to keep the older generation with us for the term of their natural life. It's not like they're expendable. Life's a lot more important than the economy, even though obviously we don't want the economy to fall into a massive hole. We've got to make those sacrifices, don't we?
We do. It's a touchy subject, so let's not stay on it for too long.
No.
We have decided to fill some space, being the Suns' 10th year in the AFL this year. Unfortunately, we're not seeing all the plans that the club had to celebrate this. But this is the 10th year in the AFL for the Gold Coast Suns, and with that we decided we would do a best 22 of the last decade, so from 2011 to 2019. That best 22, now the restrictions, what we're putting on that is the player, we must be talking about the player when they were playing at the club. So in this instance, we're going to someone like There's not
Trent
two.
McKenzie.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
he's on my list, so we'll go. We will go with Nathan Bock.
Yeah. So Nathan Bock was a superstar for Adelaide, and we only got maybe 1 or 2 seasons out of him at the Gold Coast Suns before he seriously injured himself. But I feel like that one season in 2011 and what we got from him in 2012 was all Australian material, and therefore I felt like he was worthy of being selected in our best 22 of the decade, even though he only played 27 games.
Well, I mean, the one of the things that backs that up is that he demonstrated how to play the position for guys like Rory Thompson and Stephen May, who were coming through, and so that when he did injure himself, they were thrown into the fire a bit, but they had a very good mentor to sort of get them to that point and sort of show them. And those two players have really taken off after spending a few seasons with Bocky, even though he did have that injury and he never really came back from it. So, yeah, we're not talking about that player either over the entirety of his career, because especially a key position player, they're generally not very good until they're sort of early to mid 20s, and he sort of had his golden patch with us. You probably remember him a bit in his earlier career as well, but I would argue that he played his best footy for us.
Yeah, definitely along that. Bock was more of a natural defender, but at Adelaide he was forced to play in the forward line. I specifically remember him slotting a goal to put Adelaide up in a final against Fremantle. I think it was 2008. Yeah, he was very serviceable, and then as soon as Adelaide decided to switch him back into the back line, that was when we started seeing Nathan Bock enter All-Australian calculations. And that's what we got for the Gold Coast Suns, and especially in the year 2011, we were under siege in that back line, and he stood up and he was the general and he controlled the game for the Suns. We didn't have a lot of success, but as long as Nathan Bock was playing, we at least had a chance. I guarantee we probably wouldn't have won those games that we did in 2011 if Nathan Bock wasn't playing.
Yeah, I agree with that. It would have been a winless season. It's one of those things that you kind of you look at the veterans that the Suns brought in the early days, and they were quite effective for us in that way. You know what I mean? Like the big ones, obviously Ablett, but to get a full season with a player who's playing, at his best in his position, one of the best in the comp, and really, getting really high possession totals too, which wasn't necessarily the case, and yeah, just being that role model. And character-wise, that's the other thing that tips him over and puts him in the running there, because he's recognised around the club as being the guy you wanted there with all the young guys to be a role model and help an emerging team. Which, let's face it, there were some horrendous losses, but when you're picking the best in a team that gets done by 10 goals, he's one of the first ones you'd pick every week.
Absolutely. So we'll preface that's the sort of selection basis we're going on, and because of that, we're going to have guys. I've had guys that have only played a couple of seasons for the Suns and are certainly in contention. They're not guaranteed, but I felt like they warranted consideration. Guys like Charlie Ballard, who's only been at the club for 2 years as a rookie. Clearly, it's not the best we're going to see from Ballard yet, anyway. But
I was tempted to put him in, because if I think of some of the young crew coming through, one of the players that could nail down a position, but there's guys like Campbell Brown, who you've got in your team, and Trent McKenzie, who played a lot more footy and had a more rounded game at that time than Charlie has yet. So that's why he's not in our team.
Okay. And with that, we're going to have to do some more episodes over the next month or two without any football. So we're going to be doing best 22s on different scenarios as well as we go through the next few months. One of them, I've got an idea for our next episode, is probably going to be a best 22 of our favourite players to watch that's put on the Suns Guernsey. We could also do a best 22 of former players, which is going to bring a lot of heartache to some diehard Suns fans. So any other suggestions for best 22, hit us up, let us know, and we'll see what we can do and maybe put out an episode on it. So before we get into this, I just want to thank our Patreon donors. Old Soul. The Old Soul Patreon donors are Jack's dad, Dale Snelling, Brody Burgess, Kate Kelland, Chris Moore, Paul Vosti, Robbie Fiorini, Tom Kim, and Tim. Thank you very much for supporting the show, especially in these difficult times. And that's why we're here today with a special episode without any football. So, let's get stuck into this, Tom. The best 22 off the decade for the Gold Coast Suns. Let's start in the back line, where all good teams start. So, I've gone Harbrow, Thompson, and Brown. May, Bock, and Weller.
Yep. And we've got 4 players in common, and those are Harbrow, Thompson, Mark. And I've got Weller in my team, but not in the back line, although that's a good discussion point because he has played in the back line and he's played in the midfield. Where is he playing his best footy? So the difference there is I've got Trent McKenzie, the cannon. I would argue that at his best, he was more valuable in that back line, and I do not think he would be playing in the back line in 2020 for the Suns. However, across the first maybe 6 seasons of his career, he did get injured a lot, but at his best, he was a very valuable player there, especially when he run out and kick the ball out, way past the 50-metre arc and just relieve that pressure that other teams put on the Suns when they just keep it in our forward line. Not that May didn't do that as well, but I just thought McKenzie added that, and he's sort of he could play on a medium to tall opponent. So I guess we've got the 4 the same, and we have talked a little bit about Bock already. 3 talls in the back line is it? Have you chosen that? Well, my reason for choosing the 3 talls in the back line is I think that the Suns, with a mobile back like May, when they have had the 3 talls down back, it's been good more than it's been bad.
Yeah, pretty much, and it's also the personnel we've got. We've really only had one. We've had a couple of key lockdown defenders. We've had, obviously, Thompson, who's made it into our side. You look back at the players we've had Warnock. I think Tom Murphy you'd consider a lockdown defender. We've had a lot of these lockdown defenders, but really only Thompson's the one that's proven to be reliable and effective over the long term.
He played a bit down there, didn't he?
And we've never really had a strong performance with small defenders. We've had a lot of good running halfbacks. So Harbrow, Hanley was also in consideration as well for that spot. Weller's there, Sard is there. You could even look at Malcheski. You can look at Brennan was even listed as a defender for a season.
It's a good point.
We've had a lot of those sorts of players, but the most effective ones have been those half-back key defenders that also run off. Bock was that, and so was May, and both of them have warranted to be selected. Bock, I think his 2011 season was what put him in calculations for this, and May, well, I'd probably say his last season at the Suns, 2018, was one of his better ones. We remember the way he led the club in those hard times. But he's also been very consistent. You could pick a number of seasons for Stephen May.
I think May's on-field performance did suffer a little with the captaincy. However, his leadership was tremendous. He was the real captain. Let's face it. The co-captains was what they did, I guess, to try and keep them both loyal to the club, or for whatever reasons were there. They didn't have Lynch there as an out and out leader. They had May there as the out and out leader, and he did really well. But there's been lots of discussions online about May's performances, and 2018 it wasn't. It wasn't his best year statistically, but the stats don't always tell the full story. So, yeah, I'd agree. I mean, 2016, 2017, 2018 was when May really grew into himself. He wasn't bad earlier, but that's why you'd go with the three talls with May when he was a bit younger. Having an option to switch forward too, because I've always believed that May is just devastating in the forward line. You don't want to put him there for 22 games. But when you throw him forward with a game plan and get it to him, he'll just devastate. He'll just get those couple of goals you need to lift the team.
And Nathan Bock was capable of
last season with us. He only played the 2 games. Sorry.
No, I was just saying that exact thing. Bock in his later games for the Suns. Yeah. He drifted forward. He had a bit more freedom as some of the key players at the Suns, some of the younger players stood up in defence. The only other player we've got the same is Harbrow, and I think that's pretty much a given. Harbrow,
and you wouldn't even specify a season because he's just been consistently very, very good the whole time through. Although I guess if you had to nominate a season, would you say not last year but the year before, 2018, when he was best and fairest?
Yeah, I think it was the season after he came back from that horrible wrist injury, which sort of sidetracked his season. He came back. I had my doubts because we'd gone through Ablett having injury problems, so many injury problems, and Harbrow came back and he didn't look like he'd been affected at it whatsoever. Now, we've got 2 differences in the back line. We've got Weller. I've got Weller and Campbell-Brown, and you've got Sard and Trent McKenzie. So you've already listed why you chose McKenzie. I put Weller down there over McKenzie because I just felt like I wanted to include Weller in the midfield, but I feel like we had so much midfield talent that Weller was probably going to be squeezed off to the halfback flank. So it was less about him being better than McKenzie and more about I wanted to have more midfielders, which I thought overall was better than McKenzie. McKenzie, I felt he had that one good season back in 2011 where he burst onto the scene. But after that, teams figured him out and he just was never able to replicate that, and it's kind of hard to improve upon your debut season when everyone's aware that your only party trick is your big boot.
Yeah,
your big left foot.
Look, it is fair enough, and there's an argument to say that he sort of his experience since he's left the Suns is that he's now not only got to stay fit, but he's now got to play good enough football to justify first-team selection, which you'd kind of argue that at Port he's kind of benefiting from not every player being available. So yeah, that's why we moved him on. Essentially, the attitude wasn't quite there, and the player development wasn't quite there, and that's why I would say that he wouldn't be in the team right now. But at his very best, I want him in there. I mean, Campbell-Brown's kind of similar. I mean, he came to us, it was a superannuation package for Campbell. He came to us. He wasn't really the role model you'd really want for the younger guys, especially not the way that he went out of football. But at his very best, and he seemed to be, I don't know, you might have a difference of opinion here, but for me, Campbell-Brown was the kind of guy who, when we were lifting and looked like we were in a game, he would really lift and really sort of show his best side. And he'd drift forward and kick those clutch goals, or he'd be just hard at the ball and just win the one-on-ones. That's what I liked about Campbell-Brown. But I just felt that he was a bit of a passenger sometimes. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Why did you pick him?
I picked Campbell Brown because of his mongrel. We've never really had a player in the side that has the mongrel. Campbell Brown's the most mongrel player we've ever had, and he delivered it effectively in a time when we needed mongrel the most. When we had young kids that needed to be protected and needed to be fought for, and he was there. He made a lot of mistakes. He wasn't the greatest leader, but he fought for what he believed in, and he set a good, strong example, I thought. And besides that, I can't really think of any other small defenders that we've ever had that's been any good. Small lockdown defenders.
It's a fair.
So I just felt Campbell Brown can play that small lockdown defender and wouldn't be out of place.
It's a fair point. The only thing I have to add is to give Saad his due credit. Look, a lot of people are a bit hard on him because obviously everything sort of came together for him in his final season for us. And it seemed like we knew he was good from the beginning, but yeah, he would often just blaze away and not really connect the back line to the forward line, which is his job basically. But yeah, that 2017 season, he really showed what he could do, and then he pissed us off back to Melbourne, and everyone's like, oh yeah, he can't handle it and this and that. But I really feel for him because clearly he's a talented football player. Clearly nobody really thought that he was going to be worth anything because we picked him up for nothing at the draft, and he turned out to be a really great player. And I think we probably should be more proud of him than dirty, because we actually produced an A-grade player. The fact that he went to Essendon is I lived in the area where the Saad family are from. He's got a million cousins and brothers and sisters, and that's where he belongs. Some players just aren't cut out to move away for 12, 15 years of their lives, and other players are. So he wasn't one of them. Good luck to him. He's in my 22, but I'd just be just as happy having Brown and Weller on the wing instead of on the half-back line. So we might as well go into the middle, eh?
Well, let's skip the middle because I feel like that's where the meat of this side is. Let's jump to the forward line because that's another real contentious, lots of different choices to have. We haven't really had strong forwards. Someone's decided to go on a motorbike ride. We haven't had strong forwards at the club, and this is probably the area where I feel like we've got the most amount of current players available. Looking through all the players that were up for a forward spot, I felt like most of the players I could choose were current players. So let's start off. I've got half forward line. I've got Sexton, Stanley and Day. And the full forward line, I have McPherson, Lynch and Ainsworth. And you have Tom.
So I've gone a little different to you. Now, instead of Day, I've gone with Dixon, but I'll read them out as you've read them out. So in the half-forward line, I've got Jack Martin, Charlie Dixon and Harley Bennell. And in the full forward line, I've got Tom Lynch, Alex Sexton and Brandon Matera. Now, I have to say something straight up. I didn't intentionally put Tom Lynch in the forward pocket, but I do like the look of Alex Sexton at full forward, so I kept it there. And it probably says a bit that I don't think that Tom Lynch is our best full forward of the last 9 years. Anyway, so that's a similar forward line, but I've got Ainsworth on the bench, so it's more similar in my mind than what it looks or sounds. But so Sexton, Lynch and Ainsworth are the ones we've got in common. I would have put McPherson in there. I ended up putting Matera just because I still think we're yet to see the best of Darcy, and I do think we saw the best of Brandon. So that explains that. But I'm not going to spend 10 minutes raving on about Brandon Matera because I think he might have been a wasted potential for us, and never quite wanted it. Never quite wanted to be a superstar.
All right, well, let's touch on the similarities. Sexton is fairly obvious choice. He's one of our go-to forwards currently in the side and one of the only star players in that forward line that we have. 119 games so far, averaging 12 disposals, 3 marks, 1 goal, and 2 tackles a game. That's probably looking over the stats, that's actually one of the more impressive stat lines for all of the forwards when I was looking at their statistics. The other player we have in common, Tom Lynch, that's pretty much a no-brainer there. I don't think we need to go into why Tom Lynch is in the side.
Well, the one thing to say about him is that the 2016 version is the version that we're picking him for, not the 2017 or 2018, jumping over the back fence and in the Collingwood recruitment department's backyard or whatever. That the last 2 years of Lynch's career with us were a dumpster fire, and the 2016 version of Lynch was amazing, and I don't think he'll ever get back to that.
No. All right, so the other 4 players, now we've got... Let's start off with Dixon versus Stanley. So you've chosen Charlie Dixon. Now, he played 65 games for the Suns, averaged 2 marks and 1 goal a game.
His average doesn't sound very good.
No, it doesn't.
His very best. I mean, look, I'll be brutally honest. Charlie Dixon was my favourite player from even before the first game. I liked the fact that he was an early signing, that he's a Queenslander, that he had the height and the presence. I thought he had a good attitude in the early days, and and I really liked him. I really liked Sam Day, and it was a flip of a coin. But yeah, I don't know. I just thought that Charlie had more of those moments for us, the game-winning moments, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, Charlie Dixon, he had his moments, but they were few and far in between for me. I'm never going to forget the first goal ever for the Gold Coast Suns that Dixon kicked against Carlton. And there were a couple of games there where suddenly he could catch everything and kick everything. But those games were so few and far in between that I couldn't justify that. Like, there wasn't a single season that he set alight. It was once every dozen games he'd have a blinder, and then we wouldn't see that again.
Oh, come on! In 2014, when the whole team admittedly was going pretty well, he kicked a bag of 4 in a big win against the Dogs. I see what you mean. In 2013, he got a 3 Brownlow vote winning game against GWS where he kicked 6. So I know what you're talking about. I definitely agree with you that there were games where you just went, is this all we're going to get out of him? Although his best season for us last season, and that the less said about that, the better.
Okay, so Danny Stanley played 83 games, averaging 18 disposals, 5 marks and 3 tackles a game, and he was 7th in total marks per game in 2012. So that was the season where Danny Stanley got moved forward, and he was suddenly one of our key targets in the forward line, being a strong body. And it showed just how damaging he could be with the 7th in the competition for marks per game that year. So Danny Stanley's taking the centre-half forward slot on my team. I just felt he's had the ability to play all over the ground, and that's why his figures and stats are so inflated. I think at one point he was playing midfield. He certainly played defence before. I considered him for a defensive spot, and I decided to slot him into the forward spot purely because there were just no really other dominant key forwards I felt in the club's history. And then that probably brings us to the next player, Sam Day, I've chosen. And that's just because it came down to a choice between Day and Wright for me. I wanted the three tools. And
yep.
I felt like King had only played 15 games, and as much as I wanted to put Ben King in that side after only one season, his stats weren't proficient enough to
prolific, but
prolific enough.
You're never going to put a one season guy in a team like this, unless they were just the most amazing. There's no one.
So it came down to basically a flip of the coin between Day and Wright for me, and I chose Day on the field because he's been with the club for just so long. He's given us everything he's got. I've got his stats here. 121 games, around 10 disposals a game, and around a goal a game. So he's been very solid. He's been a solid contributor, and that's what I'm getting at with the lack of forward options we've got.
Yeah, fair, that's fair enough. But there's one player who I've got that you haven't, who I feel fills that medium tall slot, and that's Jack Martin. Now we know he can kick goals, and that's all he did at Carlton in the game against Richmond a few weeks ago. So to me, it's just weird when you get a player who has, like, he literally played under every single coach the Suns have ever had. So even though his first year with us was underage, he's played under such different styles, and everyone thought he was something different. And I guess you've also got to count the assistant coaches, the line coaches who work with him. But for me, it's a no-brainer. Jack Martin is a forward, and that's how Carlton see him. And he's already pretty high up, I think, on the Coleman medal for this year. 4 goals in 1 quarter. I mean, he didn't do much for the rest of the time. But anyway, that's why I've picked Jack Martin, because when we played him forward, he would kick clutch goals. He could take great marks overhead. He could, get in and rove the pack. He could kick goals every single way you like, off both feet, and that's why I've chosen him as that sort of clutch forward. So yeah. I mean, probably similar reasons to why you've gone with Stanley.
Yeah, it's very fair enough. I honestly forgot about Jack Martin, but he'd be under consideration, but I still wouldn't think he'd be a walk into this best 22. I feel like he never produced. I feel like the 7 or 8 seasons that we had him, that he never stood up and played consistently. Similar to what I said with Dixon, he had a few good games, and that was really it. I don't recall one season where I was just like, yep, Jack Martin, fantastic, amazing player. There was always, he was okay. I hope he gets better. He's supposed to have all this potential. We never saw that. And I can't go picking him based on the thought that I thought he was going to have potential. And, so I went with Day. I think that was probably more of a favoured pick, to be honest. Who else have we got? I've got McPherson, and you've gone with Matera.
Yeah, like I explained earlier, the Darcy's best footy is in front of him, and Matera over the journey put in a probably similar, obviously different types of players, but similar to Charlie Dixon. We saw the best of Matera in games, but we never saw. Look, he's got that famous name, doesn't he? And I think he had the talent. And I have spoken to a number of people over the journey, and apparently the West Coast Eagles were interested in recruiting him, but he didn't feel that he could sort of live up to the family name with the Eagles, and ended up going to Freo for much less. So I don't know if that says something about the guy, but I was on the verge of picking McPherson, and if we were going to consolidate these two teams and agree on the best 22, I'd probably go with McPherson because I just don't really think Matera gave the best that he could have in the end.
Yeah, I don't. All I need to say about McPherson is I just love his grunt. I love his ferocity at the ball, and I felt like he deserved a spot over Matera. I didn't even consider Matera. I just don't feel like he ever delivered on the promise, and that's probably a big message in my side. I want players that are going to deliver on their promise. All right, and finally, I've got Ainsworth. You've got Bennell. I've actually got Bennell in my midfield. You've got Ainsworth on the bench. Ainsworth has been a solid contributor in the few years he's been at the club, and we're only now just starting to see him hit his straps. His numbers look good, and I think a combination of just lack of forward options for the Suns in history just gives Ainsworth that leg up into the forward pocket, or in your case, onto the bench. So let's move on to the midfield because we've got less than 10 minutes. All right, so I think Ruck is pretty straightforward. Jared Witts, you argue with that?
Yeah. No.
All right. So let's jump forward to the followers with Witts. I've got Ablett and Prestia. Again, Ablett is pretty straightforward. I don't think we need to discuss that. Probably his Brownlow year was one of his best years in AFL ever, and it just happened to be for our club, which was fantastic. Yep. And Prestia, you don't have him in the... No, you've got him on the bench as well.
Oh, the only reason I've got him on the bench is that across the 9 seasons, the Suns have had such a cracking good midfield, but never really able to keep the same midfield on the park for any duration apart from that sort of 12, 13 games in 2014. And I'm really picking Prestia on that, that period. But yeah, I've got Ablett and O'Meara.
Yeah, well, I've got the figures here for Prestia and O'Meara. I do have O'Meara in the midfield. I've got him listed as centre. So, not much difference. The reason I went with Prestia, he's had 95 games, 25 disposals, 3 marks, 4 tackles, 4 inside 50s. Compared that to O'Meara, who only had 44 games for the Suns. He only had 21 disposals, but had 4 marks, 5 tackles, and 4 inside 50s per game. So, very similar to Prestia. And that sort of shows the level of quality midfield options we've had at the Suns in particular seasons.
Well, the other guy who goes into calculations there, and the reason that Prestia is on the bench is because of David Swallow. So you've got Ablett, O'Meara, and Swallow, the 3 main mids that I've got on the inside, and you've gone with O'Meara, Ablett, and Prestia, and you put Swallow on a wing. And I think the reason you put Swallow on a wing is because he, in his younger days, he was sort of he was able to do it, and these days with his degenerative knee condition, he has lost that ability. So I get why you've done it, but that's why I haven't.
Yeah,
I've gone with Weller, so there's that speed. On the other wing, I've got Aaron Hall, and I don't know that you've got necessarily you've got Bennell, obviously, but similar players, aren't they?
They are, and I felt it was the 2014 season where we really saw the best of Bennell, and Aaron Hall. He's had his moments, but again, we see it in bursts. I think 2016 and 2015 or 2017, where we won the first 3 games of the year. We saw Aaron Hall have those strong bursts, and I think one of those years he won, got 3 Brownlow votes in each of the first 3 games, and Aaron Hall was just amazing, but then he died. He just died so quickly, and he just couldn't put together a full season, whereas I felt like Bennell in his prime could put together a full season.
Yeah, look, and then since then he hasn't done bloody anything. So yeah, it's interesting. We talked about putting together a team of former Gold Coast players, but I'll tell you what, a lot of the time those players after they've left us have been injured.
Yeah, Aaron Hall hasn't done much. Dixon hasn't done much.
Can you really name a player who's consistently been, obviously we have players who have been successful that won flags since they left us, but yeah,
I think it's only a few of the
play 22 games a year.
I think it's only a few of the more recent players. Tom Lynch is the first one that comes to mind, having won the premiership, and Jared Lyons had a standout season for Brisbane.
That was after having an injury disrupted season with us. So.
Yep.
Well, speaking of Jared Lyons, we've only got a few minutes left, and you've got Jared Lyons in your team.
I do.
So,
it was a choice between him and Aaron Hall, and I felt like Lyons was more damaging for us in the 2 seasons that he did play with us, and his statistics pretty much say the same story. He played 37 games for the Suns, averaged 24 disposals, 3 marks, and 5 tackles. So that's up there with the likes of what Prestia was delivering. Whereas Aaron Hall, 103 games for the club, averaging 19 disposals, 3 marks and 3 tackles. However, it was those 2016, 2017 seasons for Hall where he was up around that 25, 30 disposals a game where he was really delivering. The other interchange players, I've gone with Hanley and Wright, Miller and Lyons. So what did you go with?
Well, probably
Ainsworth.
Because we've got players in common that we haven't had on the same position. The players here that I've got that are different.
Bowes and Rischitelli.
Jack Bowes and Rischitelli. Now, probably Rischitelli and Lyons would be the 2 players to compare. And with Risha, I mean, it didn't end well for him, really, did it? I mean, he had the hope that he could come back from that terrible ACL injury, but he never came back to the way that he was playing in like the very first season for us. He was tremendous. 2014, when we were up and about, he was just an amazing player for the team. 2015 might have actually been his best year of all for us, even though it wasn't a good year for the team. So that era that I'm talking about there, the first 5 years for us, Rischitelli was just amazing. His output was behind Gaz, obviously, but his leadership, and I mean, they called him the spiritual leader of the team. I think nowadays maybe that's that Harbrow, but you know what I mean. Like, I couldn't leave him out.
Yeah, a player I've forgotten. There's been a few. Rischitelli certainly deserves a spot. All right, we've got 2 minutes left, so let's quickly wrap up with our special mentions or the emergencies. And you go on.
You got Miller. You got Tooth Miller, and I have got Jack Bowes.
Yeah.
So that's that.
The special mentions here is I'm giving special mentions to Bowes, Fiorini, King, and Ballard. These boys are our future, and another year or 2 for the Suns, and they are certainly going to be in that best 22. They only narrowly missed out of my choice on whether I thought they were deserving of a spot.
Yeah. No, that's all I have to say about it. I reckon that when we pick our favourite teams, we'll have a bit more to say about things, because we're not just going on stats, we're going on the feelings and emotion there. It'd be good to hear from our listeners too, what they, who was their favourite player, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a best ever. We're not sort of talking about that. Before we run out of time, I want to make a special mention to Josh Gore. He's been kicking goals from the car park down at Labrador, I think it is, from the Vision. Go and check out our Twitter feed. Cameron Gore has put up these great shots. I'll try and copy them and put them on Facebook as well.
All right, well, that concludes another episode of the GCSUNScast. Thanks for tuning in, and go Suns!
Go Suns!